5:01, Tuesday, March 16th. I'd like to call to order the Administration Committee meeting. So let's get started with a roll call, please.
Supervisor Long.
Present.
Supervisor Cook.
Present.
Supervisor Ard. We didn't hear you. Oh, you want to plug me in on the wall over there, Adam? All right. Supervisor Peterson.
Here.
Supervisor Peavy.
Here.
All right. Give it another try, Supervisor Ard. Are you present, Supervisor Ard?
Present.
There we go. We can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay, so we have approval of minutes. The first item is a little different, was requested by Cindy Campbell, the County Administrator Search Committee. There are 4 of us that were part of that committee, and since luckily that committee will no longer be meeting, we at least wanted to get the minutes approved from that final meeting of that group. So that's also included in our minutes, as well as Tuesday the 19th and then last Monday, March 1st. So did anyone have any changes or edits or comments on those minutes? Okay, hearing none, the minutes will stand as published. Public comment. I see all familiar faces, so I'm assuming we don't, but any public comment? Going once, twice? Okay, we'll move on to our business items. Ken, I'll let you take it over for the financial report.
Thank you, Chairman Long. On the financial report, we have the month of February on there. I'm going to pull it up here. The February data in and of itself doesn't have anything really of significance yet. Sorry, I'm trying to multitask. So you can see the financial report on the screen there then that we're sharing. So the month of February in and of itself doesn't have anything of significance yet. There isn't enough data to create trend lines. One of the things, and I've been pointed out over the past month also, is looking back really at the fiscal year 20 final numbers. These are pre-audit yet, but we've made all of the adjustments we're going to make. So this is pretty close to what the final numbers will look like. So this gives you a good representation of where we are. And if we look at the revenues for fiscal year 20, and if we don't have a comparison of 19 on here on the summary page, but if we looked back at, let me find a good example for you. If we look back at prior years comparisons, the county clerk would be a good example. So clerk's fees. So if you can see there on that third row down, clerk's fees in 2019 were $125,827, and they were $79,119 for fiscal year 20. So we have gone through and we've identified all of our shortfalls on revenues, because when we get to the federal stimulus money, that is one of the things that we can do is we can reimburse ourselves for lost revenues. Now, the issue with that is we're short revenues here and we're over revenues in other places. When you net it all out, we were fine because sales tax was so much stronger because people weren't traveling across the river to go shopping. They were shopping online. But one of the things that we'll want to do is to convert the money that we get from the federal government from restricted funds that have 4 uses to unrestricted funds where we can use it for whatever we want to be able to use it for. So we will still identify these, and my recommendation will be to go ahead and reimburse ourselves for wherever we had revenue shortfalls that were due to COVID restrictions. And I think Leah's been doing some research on it, so I was going to have her give you just a brief update on where we're at with that federal stimulus right now. Yep, push it.
So right.
Now you go.
Okay. So we're to be receiving approximately 17.5 million in the federal stimulus dollars. Those will come in 2 different installments. The first one will come in, and we're predicting around May. It'll be 60 days approximately after the bill has been signed and everything has gone through is when we'll receive our first payment, which will be half of those dollars. So about 8.75 million we'll receive around May. And then the second installment will come in about a year later or anytime after a year later. So we'll have to go 12 months from the day we receive the first installment of those dollars. There are some stipulations on how we can spend those dollars, of course. So we can spend them on COVID-related expenses. So again, anything that we are currently spending on COVID or have not already been reimbursed for, we will be able to recoup those dollars back. And so use those dollars to continue on COVID-related expenses. We are using a program code to track all these expenses still, so we'll have a good tracking of those. And like Ken had said, we will be able to use those for the shortfalls of the revenues, so it's another avenue that we can use those dollars. And then we can use them for infrastructure, so like a broadband, we can use it for that. And then also for some wages reimbursement on those. We will have to report on how those dollars are spent. So we will have to keep track of all of that, which we can do through using the program code. And then there is a time frame on when we can spend those dollars. So they do have to be spent by the end of 2024. So we have a couple years to spend the 17 million, but we'll have to track those and get all that done. I think that's all I have.
I heard the question asked, but I don't think I ever heard it on some of the webinars and so forth. And that, as far as the authorized spending for it, if a county was going to do some expansion or add on to the government center or whatever, would that qualify as for like helping the trades and so forth? Do we know yet?
So we are waiting for some further guidance from Treasury on how exactly those dollars can be spent. So we're not exactly sure yet, but we are looking for some more guidance on what we can use those for. So, do you have anything to add?
We don't know yet.
It's a nice problem to have.
Any other questions on the financial report then? Otherwise, we can move on then. Yeah.
Down on information technology, if I'm looking at managed print costs, was that a big front-end expense, or I'm reading that right? We only got 14% left there. I was kind of curious about that.
Yep. So the managed print IT cost is something where they spend a bunch of money and then they charge it back to the other departments and they recoup it. So it gets real big and then it shrinks back down over the course of the year.
Another one that caught my eye was the employee other expense, and
Yeah, I noticed that one earlier myself. The employee other expense, whenever someone uses their credit card, that's the default account. So if they don't code it to something, that's where it defaults on. So my guess is that somebody made a purchase with a credit card and they didn't code it off to whatever it really should be. They'll usually catch those and they'll come back and they'll fix that at a later point in time. Yep, I'd seen that one myself earlier today and was thinking about that one.
Other questions? I do have one for you. I'll put on my taxpayer hat, and the normal taxpayer might look at the sales tax and say, "Wow, we got $1 million more in sales tax," and the logical question would be, "Well, what did we do with that money? Where did that money go?"
Yep. So every year we get an estimate from the state on what our sales tax should be, and we exceeded even the state estimate this year. We purposefully budget below the state average. We shadow that state average. When the state goes up, we go up also, but we stay a percentage below that. And we do that for two reasons. We do that, one, in case there's an economic downturn, if there's a recession, we're not laying people off because we just lost revenues. So it accounts for economic recessions. And then two, we know that if we do hit target, we're going to end up with this additional money. The additional money goes into the undesignated fund balance, and the undesignated fund balance can then be reallocated by the county board to other things, such as KIP projects or debt reduction or other things that the county may deem important. So it gives us that flexibility to do that, and safeguards us against the economic downturns. So it's sitting in undesignated fund balance is where it's at. And right after the audit report every year, we come back with that report on fund balances, and then we ask you what you would like to do with any amounts that are over our fund balance policy.
Any other questions on the financial report? Okay, we'll move on to second item, resolution approving the alteration of supervisory district boundary, Village of Baldwin. Cindy, thank you.
Okay. All right, so we haven't had one of these for a while, but the Village of Baldwin annexed 2 parcels, both crossing a county supervisor district line, and this is a request to alter the boundary lines for both. The first one is a parcel from the town of Rush River, and it is approximately 10 acres, and it currently contains a home and was classified as agricultural forest. The annexed parcel from the town of Rush River is part of Ward 1 in County Supervisor District 15, and the village requests this may be made part of Ward 6 in the County Supervisor District 18. I asked the clerk what the parcel was going to be used for, and they had it rezoned, and future use is for a church campus. So there are no voters on this parcel now and likely won't be. So that's the first parcel.
Questions? Actually, I was going to ask about the usage of that, so thank you for providing that. Questions? Supervisor Peavy?
I'd move to approve the resolution, alteration of Supervisor District, Village of Baldwin, Town of Rush River.
I'll second. Any other discussion on this particular item? I'll make sure I'm looking for Supervisor R to wave her hands. Okay, well, let's go ahead and vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? It carries unanimously. We'll move on to the next resolution, approving alteration of supervisory district boundary, Village of Baldwin.
The Village of Baldwin annexed approximately 71 acres from the town of Hammond. This is vacant land which is owned by the village, and was in town of Hammond part of Ward 3 County Supervisor District 16, and the request is to make it part of Ward 3 County Supervisor District 18. And this parcel is for a future sewer plant in the Village of Baldwin.
Do we have any other background on the potential impact of the sewer plant or any other detail on that? Just it would be something that I would think if it's going to be a new sewer plant, we might at least want to be aware and what's going on. I don't know.
Oh, well, I know the village has been working on this. I think they're bonding for a new sewer plant. I don't know how it would impact the county.
Yeah, what we're approving here is the alteration of the supervisory boundaries, which is voting districts. So I understand your question about impacts on the sewer plant, but we probably wouldn't not alter the voting boundary districts because the sewer plant can or cannot handle it. A good question, but probably not specifically relevant to the action item that we have.
Supervisor Peterson?
I've moved that we approve the resolution for the boundary change, Baldwin.
Second.
Supervisor Ard, second. Any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, let's go ahead and vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Okay, we'll move on to number 4, resolution amending personnel policies.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Long. I'll turn it over to Ashley or Tara from HR. We'll go through and give just a really brief snapshot of anything significant that's changing in these. A lot of the policies are really reformatting into the new format of the personnel policy that we're developing, and we're clarifying some language. So if we've marked down that we get a lot of questions on this sentence structure in our old policy, we'll have clarified that. So some of the changes are related to that, but I'll turn it over now to the staff, and we'll scroll through the different policies and go over what changes there were. So, Ashley, are you going to take this?
Yep. The first policy is 2.1, meal periods and rest breaks. This one was primarily formatting. We did update the language from lunch periods to meal periods. Second policy, 2.2, is holidays. This policy was formatting as well. Third policy, 2.3, pay periods and timekeeping. We had a pay periods policy that was reformatted, but then we did add some timekeeping language and guidance. So the guidance included pay schedule, timelines and dates, recording of hours worked for exempt and non-exempt employees, correcting timekeeping errors, employee, manager, and department responsibilities in regards to timekeeping.
If you could just pause for a second on that one, and maybe
Sure.
just take a quick breath in between, so if there are any questions, they could ask them.
Okay.
The other thing with this one on timekeeping, so I'm going to throw out an option for you on this one. So on timekeeping, the practice we've had for exempt employees has been within 1 work week. So we look at an exempt employee is expected to work 40 hours in the week. Anything over that are excess hours, they don't get paid any additional. If they work short of the 40-hour week, they're expected to use PTO time. So if they worked 38 hours, they need to plug at least 2 hours of PTO time. There were some departments that were looking at it from a 2-week period. So they might work 38 hours in 1 week, but they worked 42 hours in the next week, and it still processes through as the 80 hours for the pay period. So much to my struggle, I've been trying to get all 650 employees to do it one way, but I'm still finding, I actually did an audit last week, I'm still finding employees that are doing it the other way. And our payroll system doesn't necessarily catch that, because the payroll system is looking at 80 hours on a pay period. It's not measuring on a week basis, even though that's what our policy says. So I was just going to throw that out there, that that's an option for you really from a policy perspective. And it was widely done practice in HHS up until about 3 years ago when we switched to the new system. That was primarily the way that all of HHS had done timekeeping for their exempt employees.
Supervisor Cook?
So Ken, is there an issue with allowing employees to use the whole 80-hour, the 2-week period to make up time, or?
No, there's no issue at all other than our policy.
Yeah.
So our policy says we follow the FMLA guidelines, and FMLA looks at 1 week at a time. Our payroll system looks at 2 weeks at a time. So there's a difference between the law and what our payroll looks at, and so there's 2 different measures going on. And so we've been trying to get everyone to do it one way, but the system won't stop them. The system still allows them to do it the other way. Probably shouldn't have told them that. But
Yeah, I just think it's interesting because I feel like there's, from a flexibility standpoint for employees, it's nice. Sometimes you are putting more hours in 1 week and, allowing people to well, they have kids activities or something, something where they need to make up the time in the following week. But I wasn't aware that the FMLA rules are only for the 40-hour week. I mean, I guess I would like to see us be able to provide our employees some flexibility.
Yep, so that's,
the 80-hour time
FMLA
period.
is the general guideline, so that's the default period that FMLA looks at. That doesn't mean that you can't look at it from a 2-week stand period. And I have had employers that I've worked for that were much more generous than that allowed you to bank time into comp time, and I'm not suggesting that or asking for that at all. But I did want to bring up the 1 week versus the 2 weeks, because it's purely a policy decision by the county board, and I wanted to explain to you that we've had a mix mash of both methods that have been done. So either policy won't be wrong. I just want to know which one you want me to have the employees use, and that's what we'll communicate to the employees.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a clarification question about that?
Absolutely, go right ahead.
Is that applying only to exempt employees?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's, the FLSA applies to the exempt employees and what I've been discussing.
Okay. The only downside to that is if someone were to be recategorized and retroactively, you possibly may be paying more overtime as a result of that audit.
Yep. Yeah, we would still have all of the data, but you're correct. Yep.
And the other thing is that I think the expectation of exempt employees is they work at least 40 hours a week.
Yep.
Yeah, I would agree with that. At least from the private sector standpoint, 40 hours is kind of the standard, but it was, when I worked in a number of different companies, it was rare that I would only put in 40 hours. But if the following week I had some sort of activity going on and I needed to leave an hour early or so to go to a hockey game or a piano recital, then I had the flexibility to do that. So I guess I would lean toward the policy of allowing that kind of flexibility.
No, so this is in the policy that we'll take to the county board on April 6th. And so I do need your recommendation on which way you want it.
Okay. Bill? Scotty or Supervisor Hart, would you, do you have anything to add, or?
I'd like to see a timekeeping policy that allows employees, exempt employees, that type of flexibility,
Okay.
as long as it is not abused.
All right. So when we get to the approval of this resolution, we'll need a modification with that. It could be incorporated into your motion if that's what you desire. But I'll turn it back over to Ashley then to jump on to the next policy.
Okay. And I apologize. I thought we were saving questions for the end, so I was going quick. The next policy is 2.8 job sharing. And the only major change is we did more of a restructure to this policy. It was very specific the way it was written before. So we actually restructured it to allow for more individualized job share agreements based on the department need. Next policy is 2.9, flexible work arrangements. This might look familiar. It was recently approved September of 2020, but we did just update some minor verbiage so that we could actually propose to eliminate the hours of work policy, and we incorporated that language into this policy. So there is a statement in the policy from the hours of work policy transferred in here. And then we did update the standard operational hours in order to be in alignment with the County Ordinance 5 versus previously it listed straight 8 to 4:30 as standard operational hours, but there's several departments that work outside of that. Next policy is 2.12, volunteer fire and emergency medical services response. And this is a new policy in order to grant time away from work for employees to volunteer with emergency response programs within the county. We use a couple reference counties when creating this, with Washington County, Wisconsin, and Pepin County.
Is there any particular reason we didn't have that policy before, or was it just an oversight?
My guess is it just would have been an oversight. I know there is one example of an employee that did volunteer, and it's not something that we never, I guess, restrained. We never didn't allow someone to volunteer if they needed to in the scheduling instance, so.
Yeah, so we had the practice, we just didn't have a policy in place that said what that
Correct.
practice would be.
Correct. Thank you. Next policy is 2.13 civil leave, and this was formatting only. Next policy is 2.14 voting. This is also a new policy to encourage employees time away from work to vote. The policy was written in accordance with Wisconsin statutes, which are already the guidelines that we do follow at the county, but this does provide easier access for employees to find those guidelines. Next policy was 2.15 county business leave. This one was also formatting only. 2.16 jury and witness leave. This was primarily formatting. We did add a couple clarifications and added language as to what the current practices are that weren't specified within the county, but that we get questions on. Next policy is 2.17 military leave. This was formatting only. 2.19 work-related injuries and illnesses. This policy, we added the language to refer to the nurse triage line, which is the current process for reporting injuries. We also added a section to differentiate between the county's role versus WMIC's role when a claim is made, in order to create less back and forth and confusion for the employee as far as who they should be contacting. And then the final policy is 2.20, emergency absences and shutdown of facilities. This policy we did condense, and we discuss employee, manager, and county responsibilities in case of an emergency, absence, or shutdown, instead of detailing each department's practice, which is the way the policy was previously written or is currently written.
And I think I did tell the HR staff that I never plan to close the building due to weather, so.
Any questions at this point? My only question is, how many more policies do you have that are still need to be updated?
Oh, yeah. Do you have a count on that or an estimate, Ashley?
60?
It will be, yes.
There are several that are like this, just formatting more so, to update that language and formatting.
Okay, any further questions? Do we have a motion to approve the resolution? Motion by Supervisor Peavy, and that would to be include the, oh, I'm sorry. The P is I get my, anyhow, that motion would be to include the modification of the, I'm not going to say this right, the exempt timekeeping. You want to clarify that to make sure we get it on record?
Yeah. Change exempt timekeeping to an 80-hour measurement period.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to second that, Supervisor Peavy? Okay. Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, we're ready to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. We'll look forward to the next 60. Okay, we'll move on now to resolution amending county board rules and bylaws. Yes, Corporation Counsel, would you like to fill us in on the changes that
Sure.
you're recommending?
So I want to emphasize that these are only recommendations, and I think you might have some discussion on at least one of these new rules. So to start off with, we're proposing to amend Article 3, Section A to alter sub 6 to, and add sub 7 to allow virtual meetings of the county board pursuant to the language that I have there. This would be at the discretion of the county board chair for whatever reason, but there would be a limit of 2 times per calendar year. And I'll take questions whenever you have a question, but I'll just proceed through these. And then if there's questions at the end or suggestions. The second change is to amend Article 3, Section E to eliminate the provision about submitting written comments to the board that would be read. We had eliminated that provision in an earlier revision, but we did not remove that. I guess the thinking behind this is that we've had instances in which people wanted comments read that were, quite frankly, derogatory towards members of the board. Plus, I believe this provision was first promulgated when there wasn't the wide use of email. Every county board supervisor has email, and if someone wants to write something to a county board supervisor, they're more than welcome to do that. So this rule makes the board rules regarding public comment consistent with the committee rules regarding public comment. Next change would be to just add a section G under Article 3. A supervisor shall not be allowed to vote by proxy. That was eliminated from Section A and then added here. Next change would be to amend Article 4, Section B. And basically the whole gist of this is to allow the county board chairperson to appoint committees of the board, except the HHS board, which by statute, because we have the county board administrator system, or the county administrative system of government, that's appointed by the county administrator. So it's proposed that the 4 remaining standing committees would be filled by appointment by the county board chair, which results in a lot of redlining of what I've always thought is a kind of a complicated proceeding. Most boards in the state of Wisconsin follow the default method in which the county board chair appoints the committee members, although there are other county boards out there that have a similar process in electing county committees. You know, if you look at the way that Chapter 59 is written and the powers that are given county and county board chairs, this is the main power that a county board chair has. an argument could be made that, well, this is too much power wielding, favoritism. But the counter argument is it gives the chief executive official the authority to have balanced committees, and it's not a popularity contest with elections. So all of that language change in there was to clarify or remove language that contemplated the election of committees. And so I think the last change would be basically adding the same language for committees that's proposed for boards with regard to virtual meetings. Virtual meetings would be allowed either partially virtual or fully virtual up to 2 times a calendar year at the discretion of the committee chair. So that's what we have for changes, at least suggested.
So let's take the first item first, the virtual meetings or virtual attendance. The one change that I least would like to recommend is that rather than look at this on a per calendar year, look at it on a what I'll call a per term year, which would be coinciding with the terms of our office, whether that April to the end of March. That seems to me that might work better when we're looking at limiting the number of virtual meetings or virtual attendance. The other way the other option that I was kind of looking at was to limit the individual as opposed to the number of meetings. So in other words, you could say a supervisor would be limited to 2 meetings for virtual attendance. That way that provides a little more flexibility for individual situations, because if the board chair decides, well, we're going to have a virtual meeting in August, there may be others that need a virtual meeting based on their needs other times in the year, and that might be a little more restrictive. So the other way to look at it would be on an individual basis. It does probably result in more often having virtual attendance, which I think is a downside because we still want to encourage everyone to be here, but it's another way of looking at it. So I'm just kind of throwing that out for us to kind of talk about and consider. I do believe that allowing some level of flexibility for virtual attendance is a good thing to try. And we might limit that to just the county board and then extend that to committees later on based on how well it works or it doesn't work. And it gives us the opportunity to kind of massage the policy, so to speak, based on our experience. So with that, I'll be quiet and ask for comment. Supervisor Peterson.
In regard to maybe looking at every new election period, I was thinking about that as you were suggesting it, and then my thought, I guess, as I think a little more about that, is the fact that sometimes you have a fairly new board, maybe even half or 3/4. So my thought is maybe it'd be just, better to leave it alone. At some later date, they can always go in and amend it if they really want to. But I think to have that set up to be addressed, obviously probably at election or shortly after election time, and a new board is, I'm not so sure if that's the thing to do. That's just a thought there. I think that might muddy the waters a little bit there. The other, I like your comment about maybe, if I'm understanding you correctly, a board chair. If some elected might want to hold virtual meetings all the way, and I don't think that would be a good thing. So I think the suggestion that maybe an individual supervisor, I'm thinking with chair approval, could, and you might have a supervisor 1 month in one district, another one in another district, but limit the total for each supervisor twice makes a lot of sense to me. So I hope I didn't muddle it up too much, but that's my thought.
Comments?
Yeah,
Supervisor Peavy?
I like the idea of making it by, your suggestion of making it by supervisor. Like every supervisor could option for 2 virtual meetings in their term. I guess I think that would be a better approach than calendar year, because then when the board changes, we're in April and we only got 6 months left. So I like that idea of just limiting it to, and I just picked a number 2, but whatever. That each supervisor could have the option of going 2 meetings virtual during their term, and I know that's more work for Ken and the staff when you got to, because you'll probably have 1 virtual supervisor at every meeting, so I assume that's a little harder if they're not all here.
Yeah, let me just explain what that is. I mean, we'll do whatever we need to do. It's feasible, obviously. But when we have virtual attendance at the meetings, there's additional pre-setup that needs to be done. So we got to make sure that that's accounted for. There's additional room setup and monitoring during the meetings that has to be done. So that's a little bit of additional staff time. The other issue is going to be voting, especially at the county board. So at the county board, we have that electronic voting system. You haven't seen it in a long time because that doesn't work when we're voting electronically. So that is going to be one of the challenges that we don't have a great answer for, of how we're going to vote all at the same time when one person isn't on that electronic system. So that's going to be something that we're going to have to overcome. And we have a couple of ideas of how we'll do that, but it's not a perfect system.
Yeah, I'd just like to re-clarify that on that option of 2 times per supervisor, I was also advocating that would have to be with board approval, because my thought is sometimes you can get a supervisor that's elected. I think we've seen that in the past where they never show up for meetings anyway. So I'm thinking if you get a supervisor that really doesn't want to spend the time coming in, that's not a good thing either. So that's why I would rather see a board chair approval required, even though it's allowable up to 2. So I'll just leave that go at that.
Comments? Supervisor Cook?
I was going to ask that question about the impact on staff if we have random supervisors coming in, but that's already been answered. My question, I'm assuming per council that this is the language that says all other applicable laws and rules. Is this being discussed, the virtual meetings at, the state level as far as open meeting law and rules around that? I know in the past, before COVID, obviously virtual meetings were not as common, so I'm assuming these, the rules are being reviewed and things like that. But so that's my one question. I'm assuming it's in line with any kind of state law about that. And my other question is, obviously right now we are meeting virtually because of COVID impacts and our emergency declaration. So how does this, is this new piece impacted by that at all?
So first, yeah, we would take into consideration the applicable open meetings laws, its interpretation by the Attorney General and best practices, providing reasonable access to the public to observe the meetings. And second of all, these rules were written with the intent that they they will be in effect after COVID. So these rules were written with the intent that they will survive after the emergency declaration. And the emergency declaration, I think, is in existence until the end of June. So that would trump these rules, but only temporarily. And if I could have a comment about the calendar year versus term, I think term's actually a better idea. So you need to decide if you're going to change the language, whether you're going to do it with the idea of 2 times per year. So you'd put four times per term, or 1 time a year approximately. So you'd want 2 times per term per board supervisor.
Yeah, I think we were thinking 2 times per term per supervisor. I think it really is important, and I did throw together some wording. I don't want to step on your toes, Scott, but I did.
I actually saw it. It looked pretty good to me, and I can take that and make the modifications.
Because I think the important thing was to, upon prior approval of the county board chair, they may be permitted to attend meetings remotely. I'm just kind of paraphrasing here. With the exception of unforeseen circumstances, approval shall be requested reasonably in advance of the meeting. And then exercised by each supervisor no more than twice per term year. I don't know if that's the right nomenclature or whatever. So that's kind of where I was coming from. I see some nodding heads, but I want to make sure that everybody seems comfortable with that direction. The other thing we could consider, if there are any more specific parameters that we would be interested, that may be advisable, may be hard to implement. There may be certain meetings that, for example, our budget approval, that the chair may decide that's not appropriate for virtual attendance. I guess that could be up to the board chair.
Mr. Chair, that language looks good, but as drafted, you've got no more than twice per term year. That would result in 4 times a term. So perhaps you just want to strike the word year.
Yeah, just clarify, do you want 2 per year, or do you want 4 over your whole 2-year term? So term, Scott's looking at term as 2 years.
2 per
Term, which is a 2-year period.
One each year.
Right. Yep.
Okay, because I was thinking 2 per year.
Okay.
So maybe we need to clarify that. And it's a maximum limit. Obviously, we don't, we want to encourage everyone to be here, but Supervisor.
Yeah, my thought is 2 per term, which would be 2 years, but it would be 2 per term. If they want the first year, that's fine, but then they're done.
They want to use them both first year.
That's fine, yeah. But my intent would be to have 2 per term.
Supervisor Ard, could I ask your opinion on that?
Well, we've learned a lot during COVID, but what I would say is that given a term is 2 years, and given that the majority of supervisors will, after COVID, be at every meeting, this is a nice resource in case of an emergent situation, which I can tell you in my work, I'm still at the office. And so it is because of an emergent situation that I am still here. So in this case, attending by virtual meeting would be wonderful. For persons who have something come up at the last minute, I think having chair approval is needed and necessary. But I would like to see this as twice a year during the term.
Supervisor Cook.
We've shown, I think, that virtual meetings work. I think I would be open to twice per, so a total of 4 times. I know we're going over the language over and over again. So 2 times per each year of the term, because I would guess I would rather see a scenario where citizens have their representative attend a meeting in case, they're stuck at work or something. If they can, only way they can attend is a virtual meeting, I would rather see that happen than that person not being able to attend and represent their district. So I would support 2 times per year of the term, 4 total, but not 4 all in 1 year, like 2 per year.
So in other words, drafted as Supervisor Long has modified the language.
I'm okay with that, however, still with board chair approval.
Yes. Well, and I'd also add, I think, since we're kind of diving into this issue for the first time, we can see how it works. And we'll probably run into some things that we didn't anticipate, and then we can revisit this actually next year when we review the bylaws again to see how well it did or didn't work and revise as needed. Does that sound reasonable? Okay, I get nodding heads, so that's
Could
good.
I clarify then? I got the term parts down. Is this being applicable to just the county board or to committees also?
And I was just going to bring that up. So that's a little later in the bylaw changes, but while we're on the same subject, should we then have this applicable to county board meetings solely to start out with, or to go ahead and extend this to committee meetings as well? Your thoughts? Who's first? Supervisor Cook.
I guess the rationale is pretty much the same. The argument is the same for allowing it at board meetings versus committee meetings. I guess the only issue would be, again, staff impact as far as being able to set up the meetings and things like that. But I personally, if we're allowing it for board meetings, then I don't see the argument being any different for committee meetings as well. But at the discretion of the committee chair, I guess, would be this difference.
I guess personally, I've been kind of struggling with this a little bit. In one sense, I'd kind of like to try it out at the board level to make sure that it's going to work okay. And depending upon some of the technological challenges that we may or may not run into, but I'm kind of on the fence. So, other comments? What do you think, Supervisor Peterson?
Well, for my 2 cents worth, and I was kind of neutral, but the more I think about it, a committee is only 5 members, and those 5 members meet once they're elected or appointed to a committee to determine the best day for them to meet. So all that said, I wouldn't think it would be as big a problem for committees to, I'd just soon wait, I think, your suggestion, see how it works with the county board first. And then if there's a need later that committees feel they need that, we could look at it. But I think maybe just the first part, county board would be a good idea for me, I think.
Supervisor Peavy.
Yeah, I have to agree. I agree with Supervisor Peterson. The committees are so much more hands-on. It's so much more gets accomplished, I think, if you're all there in person. So I think, again, for the committees, I'd like to try and stick with everybody should try to show up. And again, we can always modify this if it isn't working, that we need to change it and allow virtual committee meetings. But for now, I'd like to stick with not allowing it at the committee level.
Supervisor Ard, could I solicit your opinion?
Absolutely. You know, I have one. I do agree with everything that's being said. Committees are very hands-on. We've already proven throughout this year that we can do Zoom meetings, that we can have committee meetings with persons coming in. However, one thing that I think we should give consideration to is that we do have a significant issue in Wisconsin winters with weather and road conditions. Perhaps an addendum to this would be to add at the chair's discretion that due to weather conditions, we would be able to hold a Zoom meeting for those without affecting their twice per year term allotment.
I think the twice per year allotment would be, it would be separate for the county board. And then there would be, we're really talking about whether or not we're going to allow that at the committee level. The other thing we could do is, not go to down the committee road at this point and revisit it next year when we review the bylaws again, unless we want to add something about the weather conditions that it could be up to the committee chair as to allow a virtual meeting depending upon circumstances. Supervisor Peterson.
I guess I'd just like to highlight the fact that in the bylaws, I think it's in there, correct me if I'm wrong, that if a supervisor misses several meetings, there's no corrective action that's recommended to be taken, but if they miss so many, then there is. But all that said, if there is weather or something and a supervisor misses a meeting, they missed a meeting. I don't think it's a big issue there. I don't think we really have to mess with the bylaws right now to fix that.
So it sounds like the prevailing opinion would be to hold off on the allowing virtual attendance to committees for right now and revisit the issue in another year to see how the board virtual attendance policy is going. Would you all agree with that? I see nodding heads. Is Supervisor Ard's head nodding too, or would you like to add something?
No, I think what we do for one, we should do for all, because I'm quite sure we're going to be hearing that in the scuttlebutt. If we're going to do it for the county board, we should do it we should offer it to the committees as well.
Well, we can always bring that up as part of the discussion when we present this to the county board. And if the prevailing opinion there is that we need to extend this to committees, then that's what will happen. Does that sound reasonable?
That is reasonable.
Okay. Okay. Any more discussion on that, the policy regarding virtual attendance? Do you have what you need? Ken, thank you. Okay. So should we move on to the other option, if I'm reading this, so the appointment of committees rather than the prior process? And I guess I'll speak on this first, having gone through or experienced the prior process when I first joined the county board. It was quite the circus, if I may say so, and I think that this change is extremely positive. I think we can rely on the integrity of the county board chair to appoint supervisors to achieve balance in all of our committees, which I think is really critical. So I think this is really a good move, and I think we should make this change. Supervisor Peavy.
Yep, I agree. I think this is a long overdue change, and having gone through, I think, 9 of these elections, it's just it's difficult and it's not effective, and I think this is a good way. And having the county board chair appoint, he can appoint people to their strengths. So I think this is a good change, and I look forward to implementing this in the future. Hopefully it will all pass.
Supervisor Peterson?
I agree, not particularly as a county board chair, but as some supervisor has also gone through 8 or 9 of these meetings, and just total chaos as far as I was concerned. So this is an excellent change, in my opinion.
Other comments? Okay, so it sounds like we're good with that particular policy change.
Approval of the resolution with modifications to virtual attendance as
So are there any other changes that we need to discuss?
There's no other changes that have been proposed by Corp Counsel. These are the 2 main changes. So unless you have anything else, the recommendation can be as presented with the modifications to virtual attendance of 2 per supervisor per term year, with the chairperson's approval applicable to the county board only.
Supervisor Peavy?
I'd make that motion. I'm not even going to try to repeat what Ken just said, but it covers what we're, yep. I would move that.
Second.
And second. Okay, any further discussion on the changes in the bylaws? Seeing none, let's vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is number 6, consideration of ethics ordinance modifications. So we'll turn it back over to you, Corporation Counsel.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was asked by this committee to look at the ethics rules, which were fairly recently revised, and I don't have any particular recommendations for revisions at this time. There was an incident sometime this winter on social media with a member of a board and a public citizen that sparked some interest in essentially expanding what would be in effect expanding the scope of our code of ethics to incorporate what I would characterize as more conduct, code of conduct issues, behavioral speech issues. I've looked at several municipalities and looked at a county that's adopted conduct issues. It's certainly within the realm of the Board of Supervisors to expand or even have a separate chapter regarding a code of conduct. One of the benefits of a code of conduct would be to further define the relationships of the elected officials and the department head vis-a-vis the administrator. I mean, that can all be done. It would be certainly a substantial rewrite of the rules. I've looked at a county that's adopted essentially a code of conduct for its county board. That particular county is Oneida County. It was adopted in 2012. It was drafted by the legal counsel of the Wisconsin Counties Association. And I spoke at length with their corporation counsel about whether it changed behaviors, whether how many incidents were complained of, and he spoke that in approximately 10 years, there was one incident that went forward with some kind of resolution. The county now is considering either revising or dropping or repealing its code of conduct. I looked at the city of Green Bay that has in my opinion, a pretty good code of conduct that that basically governs the elected officials' relationships with other elected officials, the elected city council with city staff, the elected officials' conduct as it pertains to other public agencies and the public itself. But after looking at all of this, it doesn't strike me that, at least from my perspective, and certainly there are other perspectives, that it's at least necessary, legally necessary for this organization at this time to consider. I'm perfectly willing to, if the committee has a desire to explore changes and expand the scope of its code, or of its ethics code, certainly willing and able to work with the committee regarding these changes, but I have no recommendations for change at this time.
Okay, any comments? Supervisor Peterson.
I guess I would tend to agree with poor counsel. I'm thinking I would not want to get in the business of trying to control employees of the county for issues such as social media or whatever. I'm thinking in the other side of it, supervisor, I don't think we should try to mandate, I would hesitate getting in the way of freedom of speech, I guess. And the ultimate judge of that, I guess, is the folks that elect that supervisor. If he or she is performing unsatisfactorily, the voters have to take their action there. That's just my thought.
Yeah, I would agree with that. As I reviewed the Code of Ethics, I was perfectly comfortable with it, particularly the coverage section, because I know this was an issue with the incident that occurred, and the coverage, it's very clear that it covers all the elected or appointed, paid, unpaid, including members of boards, committees, commissions, department heads, and employees. So it's pretty much a blanket coverage, and I think we'd have run into challenges and issues if we decided we needed to start policing behavior or social media. It's kind of a slippery slope, and I think it's okay to rely on the integrity of our employees and staff and board and committee members. So I'm perfectly comfortable leaving the Code of Ethics as is. But I do want to hear from other committee members. Supervisor Peavy.
Yeah, I agree that I have a good code of ethics now, and one incident in all these years doesn't mean we got to change it. And for somebody to monitor Facebook or any social media, I guess, don't pick on one, it'd be impossible. And I'm very comfortable with what we have now, and I see no reason to add or change.
Other comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
everyone
Supervisor
has
Hard.
clearly stated, it is a slippery slope. The Code of Ethics and Wisconsin statute under which this has been written clearly cover the responsibilities and obligations of a duly elected public official, as well as employees who work for the county. And as you said, the electorate will make its decision. If someone is elected and their behavior in any which way is unsatisfactory, I'm quite sure the voters will let them know so. But to try and corral or change an individual's behavior, which could lead us to a First Amendment violation and certainly a lawsuit on many levels, we are best to stay with the language that we have, as it has served the county well.
Okay, I do think that it was worthwhile, for the issue to come up and to review the Code of Ethics to make sure that we're comfortable with that. So I think it was still a good process to go through. But at this point, it appears that we agree with the Corporation Council that we will not be making any changes to the ordinance at this point. Oops. Okay, let's move on to business item number 7, a resolution approving $80,000 of contingency fund for broadband assessment. Ken?
Thank you, Chair Long. We received 6 bids on our RFP for a broadband assessment. They ranged from $46,000 or $48,000 to $296,000. There were 2 outliers on there. The other 4 were actually all really close. But we've narrowed it down, working with community development and our IT director, narrowed it down to 2 bids, which we're going to be doing interviews with later this month. Timing-wise, I needed to bring the financial request now so we can get that approved by the county board on April 6th, which will have the finalist at that point also. So at this point, I only have it down to 2, but the $80,000 request would be enough to cover either of those 2 proposals, and they're very close in dollar amount. So the request right now is for $80,000 out of the $100,000 contingency fund. This one is in excess of 10% of the budget as measured against the county administrator's budget, so it does require full county board approval rather than just administration committee approval. Questions on it?
And would this be reimbursable through the new COVID legislation?
Yes, more than likely. We'll actually probably end up switching this to that. But right now, we don't have that money, and we haven't gotten clarification from Treasury, and I would like to move forward. So you'd have to approve it without a guarantee that it would be reimbursed out of that federal stimulus money, but more than likely, you're correct. I will end up switching the funding to that source.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the resolution approving $80,000 of contingency fund for broadband assessment.
Second by Supervisor Peterson. Any further discussion? I'll just add that I think this is absolutely necessary. I think we absolutely have to move ahead with this, and the sooner the better. So I certainly agree with that. So any other discussion, any comments? Supervisor Cook.
I think it's really exciting that we're moving forward, and really good timing too, that the federal money that came out, we just talked about, potential for spending some of that on broadband infrastructure. So, you know, there's many communities that go forward with a assessment like this, and then they get a report and they say, okay, well, here it is, and then they look around and they have no money. Well, we're kind of in a unique scenario where we might have money, so I'm excited about it.
Other comments, discussion? Seeing none, let's go ahead and vote. All those in favor of the resolution approving $80,000 for contingency fund for broadband assessment signify by saying aye. Oh, I'm sorry.
Aye.
I thought I heard you say 80,000.
Yes.
I misheard you, I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry. Let's try that vote again. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you. Look forward to that. Let's move on to number 8, a resolution approving $25,000 contingency fund for We Made a Difference Small Business Recognition Program.
Yeah, this was brought back from the prior month's meeting to give us more time to think about it and look at it. I don't know if Supervisor Cook has some additional to add on that, but the one thing that I would point out is that, you know, with the additional federal stimulus money coming right now, this might not be the right program at the right time. There might be other opportunities that would be more impactful. So what's changed over the last 2 months, that's what I would say has changed.
Supervisor Cook?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for bringing this back to the agenda. At the last meeting that we talked about this, I did suggest that I would go out and try to connect with the business community to get some input on the program itself. I did connect with the Hudson Chamber and communicate with them kind of some of what the program looks like, and ask them, would they feel there's value in that? I know they did reach out to some of their members who return comment that they would feel it's valuable. We're looking at a very, very small businesses here. I know there's a lot of federal money out there now, but my other thought about this program as well is, as from a COVID response, I know the program itself is kind of formed around, my thought was that I think there's value in the county recognizing those private sector businesses that have really worked with the county to move forward. As a county, as a state, we didn't really move a lot of enforcement regarding COVID, regarding we had recommendations, of public health recommendations. We basically asked folks to collaborate and work with us to implement some of those elements of the recommendations from public health. And I think without that enforcement, we relied on the goodwill and efforts of those businesses. The points that are in the application here, we basically are asking if the businesses did some of these following steps to follow the public health guidelines and work with the county. And I don't think those are unreasonable steps. I don't think the request in the application suggests that they need to do all of those things. I think we're really saying, did you do these items? And with the feedback from the chamber, there was interest in this. Having grown up as a child of small business owners, very small business owners, I think that even $1,000 is still significant to businesses that have made an effort to work with the county and the state of Wisconsin to contribute to controlling the spread of COVID. So we aren't asking folks to not using it as a way to say, are you doing this going forward? Or this isn't, my intent in this program is not to target any businesses that weren't doing things or, do any of that kind of negative approach. I'm basically looking at a way to help provide some support to those businesses that worked with the county over the last year to help make a difference. I know at the last time we had a conversation here, there was some concern expressed about the way that we would select these businesses, because I believe in the packet there's over 400 that might fit some of the criteria, and I think the suggestion right now and the way the program is structured suggests that the administration committee would review the applications, but I don't want there to be issues about favoritism or anything like that. So my suggestion would be, perhaps if businesses submit this application, then maybe there's a way that they met those expectations about making a difference, that we could just randomly select. We could do some kind of random selections and just throw all the ones that applied into a pool. So there's not any allegations of favoritism or picking a business we like or something as an administration committee. So I know there's a lot of federal money out there, but I think it also sends a message that St. Croix County values its partnerships with its businesses. It values its small businesses in the community. And if there's funds here to do this, I still feel like it's an important thing to move forward.
I'm very interested in your conversation with the chamber. This particular program came up a week ago at the the EDC, Economic Development Corporation, and there was virtually no support for the program. As a matter of fact, the board chair, Rob Krivik, indicated that La Crosse, I don't know whether it was the city or the county, had a similar program, and it kind of backfired on him. And he said that they made many more enemies than they did any friends. So they were very much against moving forward with the program. They thought that there were too much opportunity for backlash against businesses that weren't selected or didn't follow the CDC guidelines or maybe couldn't follow them because they didn't really have the wherewithal or the capital. So I found that very interesting. So, and considering that we're at a point where things are kind of starting to open up a little bit, getting vaccines, and I'm wondering if we shouldn't just maybe kind of put a hold on it. I'm not sure the timing is quite right. Personal opinion.
Mr. Chairman,
Supervisor Ard.
I would agree that the timing is not optimum. Currently, there are grants available covering all of these categories within Wisconsin tourism on that website. There are also many other state and federal programs which have come into development, especially with the passage of the new COVID package. It is difficult with the number of small businesses that we have in St. Croix County, those which are identified and those which are not, in order to get the word out to all of those vendors. This does have, most definitely has the possibility of creating ill feelings towards any type of process that we may try to initiate to select businesses. Rather, I think all businesses have done their best within their purview to operate during COVID. And for those who went the extra steps to social distance, to mask themselves and their employees, to ask their customers to mask, that's outstanding. And there is no way that we will ever be able to thank them enough, or anyone thank them enough. But I do think that this type of particular program, without having the appropriate data or metrics to track the actual actions that the businesses have taken, be able to separate businesses justly and equally, that this may be a program which would fail ultimately.
Other comments? Supervisor Peterson.
I guess I would opt to not act on this at this time. I think the administrator's probably correct. The timing is not good, so I would elect to wait. Have a look maybe later if it was really needed.
Based on that, and I guess also the feedback that I got from the EDC, I would move to temporarily table, if that's appropriate motion, the resolution for this particular program.
Yeah, I think it'd be postponed indefinitely.
Postpone indefinitely, thank you.
I'm just using my drop-down options.
I'll second.
Okay, more discussion. Any additional comments? And certainly with all due respect to Supervisor Cook, I know that the idea is to reward good behavior, and I recognize that, and I really appreciate that. I think that's when we can, that's the right route to go rather than penalizing bad behavior. But I do think that there's just too much risk at this backfiring, and I don't think the timing would be good for that. Supervisor Cook.
Well, I obviously respectfully disagree with the committee. Again, I just want to reiterate that the intent is not to negatively bring attention to businesses that may not have been able to do all of the things on this program or all of these things. That really the intent was to help out those small businesses in the county. And I know there's money out there, but I think it goes a long way for the county to also show that we appreciate those efforts to collaborate with us. So while I will disagree with where the committee is going with this, I also want to thank staff for the work that they did on it, because I do still think it's important, and and want to thank all the businesses, all of them, that have done the effort to work with the county throughout the last year.
Well said, thank you. Other comments, discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote on the if I can say this correctly, a resolution approving the $25,000 contingency fund for the We Made a Difference Small Business Recognition Program.
Mr. Chairman, the motion is to postpone the
I'm
resolution
sorry.
indefinitely?
Yes,
So that'd
I'm
be
sorry.
voting.
The motion is to postpone the resolution. And so let's vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
I,
Aye. All those opposed?
No?
The motion passes 4-1. Thank you, Supervisor Cook, though. We appreciate your comments. Okay, we'll move on to the last business item, number 9, review workers' comp and liability insurance trends.
Thank you, Chairman Long. This is an informational item, just to share with you some of the trends that we're seeing in the insurance industry. I think we're far enough into the trend that the lines are actually getting fairly clear. So the first pie chart here is just where the costs have been for workers' compensation claims. So probably no surprise there where the claim dollars end up going by department. As you can see, there's some work that has higher risk than other work. When you look at that on a bar graph, you can see that we had a really big purple line back in 2017. That was a very expensive claim that we had. And luckily, the following year was really small, so it ended up offsetting each other. But you can see a trend, even if you trend line that up, you can see that the total costs are increasing. If you look at the average over the last 5 years, it definitely exceeds the average from the prior 10 years. So you can see that claim costs are increasing. This chart is the fund balance. The line that's on there is the deductible one. We have a $550,000 deductible per work comp claim. So our target for a fund balance is that amount. That's what our fund balance policy says. And so we've been falling underneath that. So if you ask what happened in 2008 and 2009, you can see that we ended up with a negative fund balance. If you flip back to here, 2008 and 9 were actually fairly normal years for claim totals. What that tells me is underfunded. So we were decreased the funding into the work comp fund. I can almost guarantee you that's what happened back then. So it was underfunded. They finally brought the funding back up to a standard level, and we've been kind of holding steady really over almost the past 10 years now. We've just kind of held steady with a little bit of up and down. My goal would be to get us back up to that $550,000 fund balance policy line. I'm really just waiting for one good year. If we could get one good year, that would get us back to there. So right now, I think that because we fund the work comp as a percentage of payroll, as payroll is increasing, as we add more employees and employee wages go higher, we're adding more into the fund, and that's offsetting that increase in claims. So the total dollars are kind of static. So I think we're okay. It's not great, but I think we're okay. When we look at liability, unless there's any questions on work comp, I'll move on to the liability insurance. So the liability insurance, if you look at, this is our liability premiums, is the blue line. So you can see that they shot right up way back in the early 2000s. That was the result of St. Croix County claims issues that we were having. If any of you remember what the issue is, it was related to the jail. But it was back then. So there was a very large settlement, so our premiums were increased as a result of that. And then they slowly came back down. That's how come you saw the decreases. Things restabilized after that issue was addressed and taken care of. We then hit a period of very stable premiums and then actually decreasing premiums into the mid 20 teens there. But the current trend line, as you can see, is this fairly significant annual increases in liability insurance premiums. That's not related to our claims, that's related to industry claims. So if you look at the dollar amount settlements from police shootings, that's what's driving the industry, government industry. So they are multi-million-dollar claims. Anytime there is one that's out there, and those are the settlement amounts, those aren't even the jury awards. So that's what's driving the industry, and that's just costing us all more money, and as you can see by the premiums. And because the premiums are increasing, you can see the red line is our dividends, that the dividends have dropped right off because the insurance industry is losing money. If you look at liability insurance added with our other insurance, you see that same horseshoe effect where they had got up, they became steady, and now the claims are starting to go back up. And you can see, even if you look at the individual sections there, the property insurance is increasing, other insurances are increasing a little bit, but I think it's 6 of the past 7 years, we've seen a double-digit increase in total insurance premiums that we're paying out. So we're basically self-funded for a large part. We can see that on this next chart. So on our liability, we have a $1.5 million, it's $500 deductible, $1.5 million aggregate, or $500,000 deductible, $1.5 million aggregate. And that's our fund balance policy to cover that. So any claim we have that's under $500,000, we just pay ourselves. It's when it exceeds that we have any type of reinsurance coverage. You saw that our premiums were increasing, but you also see that our claims, or not our claims, this is the fund balance within the liability insurance fund is increasing. So that's steadily gone up over the past few years. So the reason behind that is even though the premiums have increased, the amount of claims we have not. We've actually had a really good claim history with WMIC. We haven't had a claim go into the reinsurance level since that jail claim almost 20 years ago now. So we haven't dipped into that reinsurance, and the amount of money that we set aside each year to cover claims has been able to grow this fund. So other than really this last year, when we had a $300,000 agreement that we had on that zoning of that parcel, we settled that for $300,000. If it wasn't for that, we could have gone up again another year, but we dipped a little bit on our total fund balance. But otherwise, we've been really good on the amount that we've been paying out. So that's been able to contribute, and we've been able to keep the amount of liability allocation steady. So liability allocation is what I charge our internal departments. So this is tax levy dollars. Somewhere this is coming off of, this is tax levy dollars. So this is how much I levy really spread across all the departments for liability insurance. You can see back in the early to mid 2000s there, it went up and then it became steady. But you can see right at the end now that this is starting to creep up also. So these are not double-digit increases like we're seeing on the premium side, because we're becoming a little bit more conservative since we have a higher fund balance. We're shrinking the amount that we set aside for that. We're becoming a little bit more efficient where we can to reduce those increases, but you can see that that is starting to impact us now also. So overall, the liability insurance has been very good. It's very stable, but you do see the upward trends on everything that's happening within that fund. So, information purposes, I'd be happy to answer any questions, though, that you have on our insurance.
Questions? Interesting, probably more than we want to know, right?
Okay, duly noted.
No, it was good, though. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, request for future agenda items. Seeing no requests, any announcements or correspondence?
I have none.
Okay.